Welcome everybody to our webinar, and this is the Building an In-House R&D Tax Service webinar. I'm Gillian Carmichael, Head of Marketing at WhisperClaims, and your host today. We've got some really interesting topics to discuss with you, and a lot of people registering, so that's really great to see, and from all over the UK, so welcome everybody. So why are we here? The WhisperClaims team and I have launched a series of really interesting educational webinars, training courses, ebooks, all to help support accountants who are looking to launch, build on and optimise their R&D tax services. Through this series, our aim is to walk you through some key topics to consider when delivering your service, and also to give you the chance to ask questions. In this webinar today, we've got a slightly different format. So we have a panel of members from our WhisperClaims accounting community. So we'll take you through some topics, and we'll be pausing in between for a wee discussion around some of those topics. I'll introduce you to the panel members shortly. So today we've got Mike Dean, we've got Phil Ellerby and Alan Wood joining us. Mike is the co-founder of WhisperClaims, and he's a really great person to chat to about the advantages of using technology and how the industry is packaging up and commercialising their R&D services. Phil Ellerby is the director of Northern Accountants and has been a WhisperClaims customer for around 2 years now. He's claimed over £400,000 of tax benefit for his clients using our technology, and that figure keeps creeping up, so well done, Phil. He'll be giving us pointers today on how he's achieved that. Alan Wood is the director of Wood Squared and one of our early adopters of WhisperClaims technology, so he's been with us for a wee while now. He's got a really interesting story to tell us about his journey to create an HMRC-friendly claims process. So we'll ask him lots of questions around that later. No pressure, Alan. So just to cover off the topics today, what we'll be discussing is taking a slice of the pie, so how the market's changed over the years and why accountants are getting more involved, driving the revenue through R&D tax, how to prepare robust claims, and building your client's pipeline. So just a bit about us, for those who haven't spoken to the WhisperClaims team before. WhisperClaims is an award-winning fintech company with expertise on the UK R&D tax relief scheme. We've built fully automated R&D claims preparation software for the accounting industry, and now have over 250 accountants who are using our technology to prepare claims. Alan and Phil, could you do a quick introduction and tell us a bit about your firm and your clients, some of the sectors you specialise in? Maybe start with Phil.
Right, yeah, no problem. So our firm was formed in 2008. We're now 4 offices across West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. There's 14 team members. We've got a 7-figure GRF. We don't really specialise in any particular niche or anything like that, so we're very much a general sort of firm as such. And we've been working particularly, I think, with the web and the IT areas on the R&D claims at the moment. So that's our sort of background as to where we are, really.
Great, thanks, Phil. Alan, what about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Alan from Wood Squared. We're based in the lockdown capital, Liverpool. So we were the first to be in there, so that's been interesting. Been founded in 2007. Smaller team than Phil, it's just the 2 of us. No real specialisms, like Phil said, for us either, so just a general practice. What brought us to WhisperClaims in the first place was just trying to come up with a solution that would work for all sizes of claims, rather than just the big claims, which is what we were finding with other solutions that were out there at the time.
You actually introduced WhisperClaims to me, didn't you, Al, in our mastermind group?
I did, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the positive for that, from my point of view, was R&D was something we stayed away from because we had no real specialist knowledge or skill set. So then obviously working with the WhisperClaim guys, it gave us the structure to start exploring it a little bit further and to realise, actually, although there are some rules around it, it's not particularly complicated as long as you probe and ask the right and appropriate questions. you can make some real benefit to your clients. So I don't think I ever thanked you for that, Al, so thank you.
Quite all right. It's quite all right.
So yeah, thanks guys. So today our aim is really to give you the opportunity to hear from Phil and Alan about their experiences. We're not going to talk too much about our technology, although Mike will sort of touch on that a little bit. If you do have any questions for Mike or Phil or Alan, please pop them into the Q&A box. You'll find that in the Zoom menu on your screen. And you can also chat to us through the chat box. I'll collect all of the questions, and then at the end we should have about 10 to 15 minutes. So we'll run through some of those questions. I'll fire them at the panel members, sorry. And hopefully you'll get some of your questions answered. So let's get going. So our first topic today looks at the R&D tax market and what the opportunity is for accountants. Mike, would you like to kick us off on that?
Yeah, thanks, Gillian. Do you want to put the next slide up? So a few headlines on this slide that kind of help set the scene. So that top line there, government are pledging 22 billion a year in public investment by Feb 2025. That's taken straight out of the government's recent R&D roadmap, which was just published in July this year. And that 22 billion is all about direct support to R&D, so it's in the form of things like grants and direct R&D support programs. Now, why would government be doing that? That's all part of their plan to increase R&D spending in the economy to about 2.5% of GDP. And why would they want to do that? Well, that's all about increasing productivity and output. And of course, given where we are at the minute with coronavirus and all of that, then that's clearly an important goal, is to try and drive through those productivity gains. So the next 3 points on there are all to do with the R&D tax scheme itself. So this is referring to the latest stats again from HMRC, came out in September. So 17% more claims were submitted in 17-18. That's the last year that was reported, so a total of 62,000 claims or so. Now, underneath that, the number of SME claims was up by the best part of 20%, and that's been consistently climbing over the last 4 or 5 years at that kind of rate. And again, within that, almost 14,000 SMEs were claiming for the first time last year. So that represents a really interesting opportunity for anyone who's looking to support businesses, is that issue of more and more SMEs are claiming. And perhaps just to add to that, within those figures, about 70% of all claims are actually really small, so under 50k eligible spend, which again, I think represents an opportunity for all of us. And just that last figure there, that all represents 35 billion in expenditure on those R&D claims made in that period. An amazing amount of investment. You want to skip to the next slide, Julian? So this is just the, if you like, the structure of the R&D advisory market. There's a big segment missing out of this, of course, which is the number of businesses who make claims themselves without any support at all. But I just wanted to cover in here, consultants left, actually kind of general business consultants, maybe innovation consultants, people like that, who see R&D as a little bit of a service extension to what they do as a core business. Over on the right there, the R&D specialists. So these tend to be larger organisations who specialise in supporting R&D claims. They might also do some other areas of funding, perhaps helping people with grant applications. And then, of course, accountants down at the bottom there. And of course, the key thing is, whoever you are and however you've prepared your claim, your claim's always going to get submitted via an accountant, or generally is going to get submitted via an accountant through your corporation tax return. So although a lot of accountants are not active in the market in terms of helping their customers to put a claim together, they're certainly involved in submitting it to HMRC. And I'll talk in a little while about some of the drivers as to why accountants come to us to use our technology.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Just one thing for the panel members, if you could try and sort of raise your volume a little bit, just it's a wee bit quiet. Thank you. So So here's a sort of a point now where we can kind of pause and sort of have a bit of a discussion around this. So, Alan, do you recognise any of the trends there that Mike has just been talking through?
Yeah, definitely. I think particularly the sort of size of the claim and the sort of the people doing first claims. I think definitely we found that ourselves. One of the biggest changes for us over the last few years has been the fact that with using WhisperClaims, we've been able to look at every claim rather than just the claims that previously sort of specialists and sort of consultants had looked at and said, well, that's not big enough for us to warrant submitting the claim. Great thing now for us is that we can look at claims, whether they're a few thousand or whether there's 40, 50,000, it doesn't really matter now. So I think definitely, yeah, we've seen that change certainly from what we've processed and been able to process in the businesses we've been able to help.
And it feels like the same for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think before, like Alan says, a lot of people wouldn't be able to claim R&D because they didn't have the avenues to follow that down with, because the consultants and the specialists weren't really interested in anything unless it was clearing them. I think that I heard one stat that they wouldn't look at anything where they wouldn't make more than a £5,000 fee. Well, that's a good number for them, but for all the other small businesses, you can still make a profound impact by making those little claims. I think one of the smallest claims we made, I think, reduced the tax bill by about £2,000. Well, that's not a significant number for us in terms of the fees that we can generate, but in terms of being able to do that for that client, it made an absolutely massive difference to their cash flow and their position.
Have you seen any sort of changes that have happened as the result of the coronavirus taking off?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that the coronavirus has done, particularly within our client base, is it's given people the time to listen to us when we talk about the potential with R&D. The need to get cash into the business quickly has also kind of forced the desire to have those conversations, and more importantly, the desire to help provide the information you need to get the claim over the line. So from an R&D point of view, the coronavirus has been pretty good from that point of view, obviously. But in general, yeah, I think it's been massive. I mean, we've got an example where we had a client who he made a significant amount of money in, I think it was 2018, big tax bill, reinvested all his money into a different project that never really took off. So I stuck with a big tax bill that he never paid. Massive R&D benefits in the 18 and the 19 tax year, and we were talking to the insolvency practitioners at one point about shutting that business down. When we explored the R&D opportunities, we cleared the historic tax bill and pumped another 10-15,000 into his cash flow. So, and that's all after our fees as well. So, it was a massive swing for him, and ultimately it saved his business and it stopped it going into liquidation. So having that time and spending the time with the clients and also having them on board made a difference of saving that company, and I think probably about 10 people's jobs as well.
Mike, are you in your conversations with accountants? Are you seeing similar conversations happening there? Or? Yeah,
well, I guess the big effect that we've seen over the course of the summer and through lockdown is two things actually. A big increase in the uptake in the platform, so lots of new customers coming to us, lots of new users. But on the back of that, of course, a really increasing throughput of claims. So we've seen about, off the top of my head, something like a 60% or so increase in the number of claims going through the platform just through that lockdown period. And that, I have no doubt that it's to do with the kind of effect that Phil's talking about there.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, so we often talk about the need to create a well-oiled R&D tax machine. And just over the past 2 years, we've had a lot of accountants joining us. So we've had about 250 accountants now using our technology. And we've seen over 750 claims being put through the system, worth around about 20 million in tax benefit. Mike, you know a lot about these claims. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of size, what kind of companies, what's going on there?
Yeah, well, I checked our stats actually just before we went live on this call. So as of this morning, we've had £91.5 million worth of eligible spend go through the platform, so huge numbers. But it's worth mentioning that the average size of claim that we see going through is about 100K's worth of eligible spend. Now that masks a couple of things. So the biggest claim we've ever had was 7 million of eligible, so a pretty substantial claim, that's fair to say. But the smallest, kind of in line with what Phil said earlier on, was for £1,000 of eligible spend, so actually about £250 worth of tax benefit. So a tiny claim. So those outliers sort of skew that average figure. I think the reality is the bulk of claims going through are at about that 50K eligible spend level, so very much in line with the HMRC stats that I mentioned earlier on.
And Phil, you've made up a proportion of these claims, probably quite a large proportion. What sort of companies are you supporting at the moment?
Like I say, it's all SMEs, and most of the claims are around the 50,000 mark. Particularly the IT industry, quite a lot in the design and the media, with all the innovations within the web that they need to do. Quite a bit in the food sector as well. And trying to think who else we've done it. We've actually had a couple of big claims in the construction industry as well, which was probably not something you would generally think about, but there was some decent R&D expenditure in there. So that's both those claims have so far proved to be successful. So it was something that you probably wouldn't have considered before, but actually it turns out that there was a pretty substantial claim in. Okay,
it's interesting. I think that's a common theme for a lot of the firms that we speak to. So there is a section in here today that we're going to be talking a bit more about that. So Mike, quite often we talk to accountants about the benefits of preparing claims in-house, such as improved margins and being able to take back more control. Can you tell us a little bit more about the main considerations?
Yeah, sure. If you get that next slide up, Gillian. So just to mention, why do accountants come and speak to us in the first place? And I think there's two kind of drivers for that. One group, I would say, are looking to grow, so they're looking to maybe add a new service line to generate new revenue, and within that they might be looking to deliver those services to existing customers. They might be looking to use that new service as a hook for new businesses. We see all of that going on. We've got a second group who engage us because they're maybe already doing claims but looking for a more efficient way to do it. So building capacity, increasing throughput. So given that, there are some kind of common themes, if you like, and that's what we've got on the slide here. So that first one, we see, is about maximising your margins. So that's got two elements to it. Talking to accountants here, so I don't need to say too much about this, but making sure that the pricing's right and making sure that your delivery costs are appropriate. Second thing is learning the fundamentals. So Phil mentioned this earlier on, that he came into the market not knowing much about the scheme itself. And it's really important to try and get an understanding of the drivers from HMRC, what makes a company eligible, what makes projects eligible. And of course, an element of the service we deliver, a huge element of the service we deliver is all about helping with that. Next thing is developing a clear proposition. So that's actually making sure that the messaging that you're putting out to your market, whether that's existing customers or new ones, is really clear. So making sure that those customers understand what the value add is that you're bringing to the table. Growing your pipeline, what does that mean? Well, that's obviously all about sales and marketing. So that's how are you going to reach out to those people when you've got that messaging right? And on those last 2 points, I know, Gillian, you're going to mention it in a little while, but we've got a joint webinar coming up in the next week with Practice Web that's all about those points. How do you position and sell a new service? And then the last one is creating some. Again, that's just about managing that cost of delivery and making sure that service is being delivered at an appropriate cost level.
Apologies to anyone who's having any trouble hearing us. Mike, I think we need to invest in some microphones in the future. Take note.
You can see those messages coming through.
Yeah. So if we can all try to sort of project our voices, I think that's as much as we can do just now. Sorry about that. So yeah, let's discuss how are accountants marketing their service. Are there any sort of key strategies that you've seen out there in the industry? Question for Mike.
Yeah, we, in the mix of our customers, I'd say we've got the majority of people who've adopted our technology. I would describe as entrepreneurial firm owners, and we've got two great examples of those here with Phil and Alan. So people who are really kind of being proactive about how they do some of those things I mentioned earlier on, getting the positioning right, maybe working on how to present this service on their website, how they might incorporate messages about R&D in their regular catch-up conversations with clients and so on. So certainly there are, we see patterns amongst our user base around that. But I think, what holds people back is especially a lack of knowledge and understanding about the scheme, and therefore a lack of confidence in being able to talk about it with their clients. And again, that's one of the things we try to address with the platform and with the service wrap, the training services particularly that we wrap around the app.
We've got a question here actually that I'll just ask now from Maria. Are there any particular industries and professions besides IT that the panelists are marketing to?
Engineering and manufacturing for us are quite big. There's some good stuff going on in there. Yes, we've got quite a good penetration when we've gone in and sat down with the business owners, things that probably questions you wouldn't necessarily have asked before. So one of the things that we did to really, I suppose it's not marketing it really, it's just talking about it. So R&D is on every single one of our agendas. So we talk about, what opportunities they've got within what they're doing, how they're doing, what have they changed, what have they had to reinvent or adapt or improve or build on. And those conversations actually spark quite a lot of conversation around, things, what's going on within the business that we wouldn't necessarily normally get to know about when it comes to preparing tax comps at the end of the year, and we're analysing the analytical spend and the more traditional side of things. So I think actually just having the conversation with your client is probably the best marketing tool you can get, because even if they don't have an R&D expenditure, they certainly talk to their friends and contacts and professional sort of associated people that my accountant spoke to me about this. Have you thought about this? Because they then develop an understanding of what R&D is, and they talk about it to somebody else, and then that somebody else generally comes and talks to you. So I think having those conversations with your clients is an absolute no-brainer. And all you're doing is, most people who sat watching the call will have an agenda that they want to go through, even if it's just at their year-end meeting. We have a client contact schedule, so it's on everything. But even if it's just on your year-end meeting as a point to have, you're putting a line on a piece of paper and just talking around the subject. So I think that is probably the best marketing tool that you can get.
Phil, you've mentioned before that a lot of your businesses come from existing clients. At what point do you think you'll need to start looking out with that and building your business with new companies coming in?
Well, it's certainly something that we're looking to do in the imminent future. It's proved massively successful internally, and we haven't spoke to every single client as yet because the schedule just hasn't allowed that to do that. Because obviously you've got to invest some time in understanding the business and where the potential might be. So for some businesses, you're not going to spend hours and talking about R&D with clients where there's absolutely no chance there is R&D or anything like that in it. So there's a bit of upfront time to put into it. But we've just launched, we're just finalising our sort of landing page, which will be all about R&D and about the benefits of the R&D. And if anybody wants to then talk about R&D, they can. So our social media campaign will again very much kicking around driving people to that landing page, then hopefully get a click through where we'll set up a meeting and a conversation and then do the R&D. And I think, if you start doing the R&D for other accountants' clients, it puts an element of doubt in the client's mind as to whether they're with the right account in the first place. Because if you've managed to identify something, why haven't they? So I think again that will build quite a lot for us in the coming months. So we've already seen a couple of little bits through our little trials that we've ran. One or two's been successful, nothing particularly major at the moment, but again, you've got a relationship with those people, and I think investing in that relationship long term will add to a client section.
And Alan, what kind of pricing models have you seen in the market? Hopefully that's not a difficult question.
No, not at all. No, I think the majority, certainly from our point of view, the one that we use is a percentage based on tax savings that are generated. I've seen all kinds of pricing models in the market, people using it based on eligible spend or different types of criteria, which I don't think is necessarily the fairest. So we've always done it just based on the tax benefit, whether that's because whether they've taken the actual physical tax saving or whether they've had to do a sort of cash credit. So depending on whatever that tax benefit is, we've applied a percentage of that. And in most cases, that's a really reasonable fee from our point of view. But as Phil said earlier, we've had a couple of clients that have had claims of £2,000-3,000, and even in that case, the fee for us, it's still sufficient, if you like, to be able to do the work. And the impact on that business is really, that's the main reason for us doing these things, really, is to help businesses through this. Certainly the last 6 months has been a difficult period, and the next 18 months probably isn't going to be any easier. So if we can help them reduce the tax bill or get tax back, and we can market that and do it so there's a no risk situation for them, they only pay a fee once they've secured the benefit, then we've never had any objection to that way of pricing.
Mike, is that a trend that you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I've noticed we've got a couple of questions have come through actually on exactly this topic. So Maria and Abdul have both asked, is there an average percentage that's applied? So just in terms of what we kind of observe in the market, if you're looking at some of the larger R&D specialists, then one or two of them are still at really quite high percentages, so up to as much as 28% of the tax benefit. I think on average, I'd probably say what we see is more like 15 to 20% perhaps, but we're also seeing an increasing number of people going with fixed fee work as well. So it's a real mixture. There's not really a kind of obvious answer to that pricing question. It's really down to the nature of your clients, the nature of the relationship you've got, the value you might be adding, so the size of claims, and therefore what might fit best. There's literally a plethora of pricing models out there in the market right now.
Thanks, Mike. I don't know if you've seen the question from Mohammed there.
Oh, I was told that HMRC. So this is Mohammed asking. I was told that HMRC doesn't like a percentage of the claim as a price. Yeah, we've seen a few reports coming out of that being a bit of an issue, I suppose, and that's been reported through the R&D consultative committee that we participate in. Yeah, I think the discomfort is coming from the perspective of if you're charging a pure contingent fee, then you might be incentivized to push the boundaries of that piece of work. And in doing that, you might push it beyond what HMRC is likely to appreciate. So yeah, there is a little bit of pressure on that. But I think the key message there is to make sure that if you are doing it on a percentage basis, you're being completely honest, if you like, and are working to the HMRC guidelines. And so long as you're doing that and you're not pushing the boundaries too far, then you should be fine.
Brilliant. Okay, let's move on to the next. Apologies, actually, one extra thing to mention is we are running another webinar. So that's next Friday, and it's hosted by Practice Web, who are a marketing agency who specifically help accounting companies to build their business and market their business and create marketing strategies. So Mike has asked our Mike to get involved and to join the discussion around how you can package up, commercialize, and promote your R&D service specifically. But it might also be useful for anyone who is just generally interested in some marketing advice on how to build their accounting business. So it does apply to any service that you have. So please join us, and I will send you the details of that event after this webinar via email. So moving on to the next subject, preparing robust claims. So this is a really big subject. Quite often a lot of companies come to us to talk about. I'm aware that there's a lot of benefits of creating an HMRC friendly claims process. and using sort of different ways to do that, whether it's technology or other. Mike, can we start with you? What are your pointers?
Do you want to put the next slide up? Brilliant, thank you. So these points are kind of irrespective of whether you're using technology or not to deliver your service. So consistent, systematic, cost-effective process. So what do we mean by that? So however you do this, you need a step-by-step process. You need to be thorough, make sure you've got a repeatable process so you treat every client that you're working with the same way and address all of HMRC's requirements as you do that. Remove uncertainty. So what does that mean? That's about being clear about those HMRC guidelines that I mentioned earlier on. Make sure that you're sticking within those and that your claims are robust. It's important to have what we refer to here as a simple technical narrative. So make the reports really clear, simple, and easy to understand. Not just from your client's perspective, but make sure that a tax inspector who's reading it is going to be clear about what it is that you're claiming for and why that's eligible. And then that last point, don't assume your client knows. That's kind of got two implications. So one is, if you just ask your clients, are you doing R&D? You're going to get one of two answers, aren't you? Generally, if they say yes, they might well be just talking about the exciting and interesting things that are being worked on, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that they're meeting the HMRC criteria. Equally, they might say, no, I'm not doing any R&D. And actually, they don't know what HMRC's definition of R&D is. So spending some time with them on working through that and helping them understand whether they've got eligible work is really critical.
So let's discuss what makes a claims process robust. So I'm gonna throw that to an open question there to the panelists. What makes a claims process robust?
What makes the claim? I think fundamentally, you've got to understand the guidelines to be able to put the system in place. If you don't understand the guidelines and you can't produce a consistent and clear report that doesn't contradict itself, then there's no way possible you can build the sort of robust process behind it. So I think once you've got that fundamental understanding of the guidelines, you can use a system like WhisperClaims, which will guide you through the structure and the construction of the reports in a methodical and logical way, ensuring you consider everything. So I think for me, to make the process robust, you have to understand what you're trying to achieve at the end of it, as opposed to just going along with it and winging it as you go along.
And what are the best ways to build your knowledge on the HMRC criteria? Because I would imagine that's one of the most important things to be thinking about as you're developing that process.
Well, to be honest, what we did, and not to plug WhisperClaims here, but we did the WhisperClaims training course as well. So the entire team went on the WhisperClaims training to understand what is eligible for R&D, what isn't eligible for R&D, to look at where the grey areas were, and to get a real understanding of where it is and what you can and can't do. And that kind of picks up the flags where you say there's an opportunity here or there isn't an opportunity here. So it enables you to focus your time in the right place. And then I suppose what happens is the R&D specialist then picks it up and then they really delve into it. So not every one of our client managers is an R&D specialist, but they are all very much switched on to understanding where the opportunities may well lie, to point those out to the specialists that we've got.
Alan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think prior to us coming over to WhisperClaims, we had a sort of not a pleasant experience with one of the specialists or consultants with regards to R&D. So, but in a weird way, because of the help we got from WhisperClaims, Richard and Jen in particular, with helping us to defend those claims with the revenue, that really gave us a clear understanding and made our process robust. So that was, I say, by not necessarily the way we would like to have done it, but the way that we almost ended up having to do it. The support that's there from the team at WhisperClaims and obviously the software itself has just been fantastic, because even when we come across a client and we're thinking about, has this got any eligibility? Does this particular one, does it fit the criteria? We've been able to send that across to the guys at WhisperClaims, and they've sort of come back and said, well, yeah, I think it does. more so on this area than that area, or actually no, it doesn't, or so straight away we've been able to sort of pre-qualify some of those things quite early on, just to sort of reassure. Certainly from my point of view, I was quite nervous coming from that situation where we'd had not the robust process, but not necessarily, it wasn't our process to have, if you like, at the time. We were nervous then to sort of look at R&D, but actually the WhisperClaims platform and the team that's there has really put the confidence back into us, so that we're now able to do those claims, and we've had no issues whatsoever with any of the claims that we've done through WhisperClaims, and the support, as I say, from them has been fantastic as well.
Brilliant.
I think the pre-judging, the pre-review that the guys at WhisperClaims do is brilliant for us. It really just gives us that assurance that we can go to the market and go to the revenue with a solid claim, which doesn't trigger any major underlying red flags. So I think that's a great step in the process.
Yeah. But I think the other thing we found as well, Mike mentioned it on the previous slide, is that the issue we had with the previous specialists that we were using was they provided too much information. So they were actually effectively telling a story. It was almost like an essay they were writing for a dissertation for university, as opposed to a technical report for R&D purposes. So the one thing that we picked up more than ever is that in a lot of cases with the R&D, less is better than more, in a sense. As long as you get the right detail in that technical report, that's really all that really matters. You don't necessarily have to go into it in a huge amount of detail within the technical report itself, as long as you've got that to back up the report if needed.
I think there's a view on, I've got to justify my fee here, so I've got to write we got an R&D report for a dental specialist, and it was 19 pages long, and it's like, wow. And there was basically nothing of any real interest, and if anything, it almost undermined the claim. So I would expect a challenge on that claim, if I'm honest, because it is so wide open about the things that they've done and what it appears that they're claiming for, that actually will probably cause them more harm than it actually will benefit them from writing that 19-page report. And what might be a small claim as well is only something like 60 grand's worth of eligible expenditure. So yeah, almost suggested not to include that element of the claim, cut it all down, but they wanted to go with it. So on their head be it.
Mike, have you got anything to add to this?
Well, just to reinforce the point that both of the guys made there, the danger is that you write a report for the client, so you feel like you've got to embellish it to justify your fee, when actually what you should be thinking about is, what does HMRC need to know in order to process the claim. So they're two different ways of looking at a claim, and we would definitely recommend focusing on the latter. Think about what HMRC need to know.
Yeah, the client knows the story, doesn't they?
Yeah,
because they told you it.
Yeah.
To what extent does collaboration help with this? So if you're collaborating with your clients, gathering information, does that help in this situation?
Yeah, I'd say massively, because whilst I think we need to ask the question, I think that's the key thing, because like Mike said earlier, that businesses don't always know what is or isn't R&D. But I think as long as we can ask the right questions and frame them in the right way, it's the business owners and the employees in the business that knows what they're actually doing and what they've done. So the collaboration side, is massive, because that then just allows you to sort of pick out those relevant items, relevant things that they've done, which then effectively links then to the cost element of those actions then, so that we can put together a claim that is genuine then, and actually has got a huge amount of credibility to it, because it's something that we've done together rather than just something we've tried to create without their involvement.
And I think the collaboration prevents any prejudging or any assumptions, because that can be massively dangerous as well from our point of view. If we make an assumption that something is or isn't eligible without really exploring it any further, just on a very brief term, then you could potentially be doing the client a disjustice in making an underclaimment, or even worse, you can be making a claim that isn't right, and then it comes back to them 12 months down the line, or whenever the time period, should it ever get investigated, and it's an instant reclaim of the cash. So I think the collaboration is so fundamental to understanding the true sort of situation that you put in a claim against.
Mike, how does collaboration work with the technology that we've built?
So within the platform, you're able to invite your client into the process. So essentially, the client can work through the question set themselves, answer any or all of the questions. So you've got the opportunity to work alongside them throughout the claim process. And we see, I think right now, about 40% of all the claims going through the platform are done that way. So our customer, the accountant, will have invited the client onto the platform remotely, and they'll do a large portion of the work themselves. I suspect some of that, to be honest, has been driven more recently by lockdown. So obviously there's less opportunity to go and see people. So perhaps that's driven the uptake there. But we're certainly seeing that happen more and more.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that, guys. So this is our final topic today before we move on to the Q&A. For anyone who would like to ask a question to Mike, Phil or Alan, please pop that into the chat box. You can also use the Q&A box on the Zoom menu, and we'll ask those questions at the very end. So the last subject today is really important. Without clients, there is no R&D service. So let's have a chat about what it means to be eligible and how you can find work that meets the HMRC criteria. So who should we be focusing on? Mike, in previous webinars, you've talked a lot about looking beyond the obvious and who should we be focusing on, and where can R&D generally be found? So you tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, you get the next slide up. This is taken straight from that September report from HMRC on the latest stats for the scheme. So let's just have a look at that. Manufacturing, professional, scientific and technical, and information and communication sectors continue to have the greatest volume of claims. So 66% of all claims came from those three headline sectors. Now they include your kind of obvious areas, I suppose. So engineering, tech, IT, anywhere who's got a lab with people in white coats would all kind of fall into those categories. I think what's interesting is that what that's also saying is that 34% of claims are coming from elsewhere. And when you delve into that report in a little more detail, you find that the rest of that 34% are coming from a really wide spread of different sectors. And I've noted a few of those down. It's things like agriculture, water, sewage and waste, the transport sector, finance, education, so a whole raft of different areas. Now we've just recently started to publish some blog posts on some of these kind of more edge cases, if you like. So a couple of recent ones for us, we've done one on the food and drink sector, where we talk in there about the emphasis on things like reduced sugar in foodstuffs and drinks and so on, where there's a lot of R&D going into that area because there's legislative pressure on that happening in those sectors. Focus on vegan meat alternatives as well. It's another area where there's lots of focus in R&D. And then we've done another one on agriculture and farming as well. And one of the great examples that we reference in that sector is a sprout grower that we came across. So in that case, you would think sprout farmer, where does eligibility lie in that? It was an organisation that came up with a new machine for cutting and trimming sprouts within their process. Lots of eligibility in that. So what I'd recommend people do is have a look at our blog posts, and you'll get a real idea for some of those edge cases.
One of the quotes I really love, so we quite often talk to some of the WhisperClaims users about their experience and how they're getting on. Sole Associates was one of the ones that I spoke to, and this was a brilliant quote. I thought, one lesson we've learned is not to prejudge where you think a client might have an R&D claim. So this was about asking the right questions, probing your clients, and digging deeper to find out whether that company actually has got work that's eligible. And Sole Associates, prior to using WhisperClaims, had a few clients who actually, it turned out, did have an R&D claim, but it wasn't until they had gone through this process that they realised that. So I wanted to throw this question at Phil and Alan. What does this quote mean to you? And does it reflect the way that you run your service?
It does for me massively. I mean, even going back years when you talked about, going back to the added value stuff, it was about not prejudging anybody on size or tax opportunities or anything like that. So one of the things we've worked hard to do since we got involved with this was basically ask every client one way or another. Some you will follow up a little bit more and be a little bit more tenacious with in your questioning than others. But actually, there's so many different things. We had a vegan food manufacturer. Never even crossed my mind initially that there would be any R&D involved in it when I first sat down. But when I started looking at the file and they've redesigned a vegan sausage roll and all that sort of thing, it's just, again, it becomes very easy to identify things. But you have to ask the question, because if you hadn't asked the question, that claim would have never been made. And subsequently, we'd have done our clients a disservice. Because again, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we cover every tax opportunity. So by just asking the question and spending time with people, and I know there's an investment in that, it pays dividends. And ultimately, from a financial point of view for the client, it's massively beneficial, and from a financial point for your firm as well, it's hugely beneficial. It can be, R&D can be transformational in businesses. So it's really something that I do think that people should really get behind and put some time and investment into it to see what they can achieve from it.
Alan, I think it was you who I was speaking to about some of your clients, and if I'm right, you had a jeweller's who was manufacturing technology to repair jewellery.
Yeah.
And so you had manufacturers who you had to reach out to in order to kind of understand what that claim looked like. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so again, so in theory, you'd probably say that was a retail client because they have jewelry shops, but actually they have a manufacturing process in the background because they make and repair jewelry items for national chains of other jewelers, in effect. So so that was quite an interesting one to actually sort of get past the fact that they're just a retailer. So again, that was sort of the first point, was to say, well, no, they're not. They're actually predominantly, probably 70% of their revenue actually comes from the manufacturing side of it. The retail is really just there for the presence, I suppose, on the high street to be able to get that passing trade and just get the repair work and get that sort of specialist stuff that they do. And yeah, just trying to understand that process, and that was where the collaboration was crucial, because they've all been goldsmiths for 40 years. I've bought jewelry, but I've never manufactured anything. I don't know the challenges that they have and they've had to overcome. And it was really fascinating to try and learn more just about them as a business and their sector, which was really good. It's I think you do find a lot more out about your clients. So whilst there's definitely the financial benefit, as Phil said, for them and for us as a business as well, there's a huge relationship benefit as well, because we've spent time now understanding what their process is. The fact that this manufacturer, what they manufacture, it just means that we can understand their numbers and understand their business so much better as well.
Right. So just some kind of key takeaways from this whole discussion. Some main things to think about are, take advantage of the continued investment in R&D. Think about how to create that well-oiled claims process that will maximise your profit and that also adds value to your clients. And consider how you'll commercialise, package up and promote your service. As I said, we do have a webinar coming up next Friday on that, so please do dial in. And remember to create consistent, systematic and cost-effective processes. So going back to what Mike was saying, think about how you can make your claims process slick. And look beyond the obvious. So take Phil and Alan's advice there, probe your clients, look beyond the obvious industries and dig a bit deeper. So a few people have asked, what do we have coming up over the next coming weeks and months? So we mentioned we've got a training course, which is about learning the fundamentals of the R&D tax relief scheme. So it doesn't talk about our technology. This is purely all about the HMRC criteria. It's run by Jen Badger, who works at WhisperClaims. She's an R&D expert, used to work in a consultancy firm for many years prior to coming to WhisperClaims. She'll take you through everything you need to know about the criteria, which would be great to develop your knowledge, but also really good if you're looking at reaching out to more of your customers, so that you can explain the basic fundamentals to them too. And in terms of webinars, we have our Friday webinar next week, which is with Practice Web, all about marketing your service. And coming up in November, we'll be talking a little bit more about identifying eligible clients. So please join us on that. To find out more about it, I will be sending you an email after this webinar, so all the links will be there. And keep an eye on our monthly newsletter. So we do intend to run more of these events over the coming months, and our newsletter will be the place that will keep you updated on that. So that's us reached the end of our slideshow there. We've got some time left for Q&A, around about 7 minutes. I'd like to end on time. Mike, if you could just jump into the live chat.
Yeah, we've got a few cracking questions coming through. Just a really quick one to take is Mohammed asked a supplementary question about pricing, which is what's the alternative to average percent. So just to mention, we're seeing a lot of our users go with fixed fee based pricing. And although, as I mentioned earlier on, there's lots of different ways of going about this. I'd say the average fixed fee we're seeing people go with is about 2.5 to 3K, that kind of level. So we're seeing a lot of people do that these days. But as I said earlier on, it kind of depends on your customer base and the value that you're adding. We've got a great question from Rachel as well, which is asking about how quickly HMRC are approving claims. I don't know whether Phil or Alan, you want to take that on?
3 days is the quickest we've had our money paid out.
3 days, did you say?
Yeah. Went in on a Friday, got cleared on the Tuesday.
Yeah, we've had the same. I know some people have said that they've, I think they worked for sort of 20 days, and they did say there could be a longer period of that during COVID because people were working from home. But like Phil said, the last one we submitted, I think it was pretty much over the weekend, and it was in the bank, and it was bizarre how quick it was. Because they're saying they've accepted the claim, I think that's the other thing just to confirm on that. But yeah, the processing of the claims has been, for us, it's always been probably within a week. There's never been anything really that long that when it comes to actually processing claims.
I think we're seeing 28 days on average is really where we're at.
I think 28 days is what HMRC quote. But like you say, a lot of people are seeing them come through a lot quicker just now.
Nothing longer than 28 days.
Yeah.
Anything longer than 28 days because our system tracks when it should come in so we can check, and we never get to that stage in the process.
There's a supplementary question from Rachel there as well. That's about how many claims are queried by HMRC. I'll get your views in a second, guys, but what we see is a sample rate that appears to be very low. So not many claims appear to be necessarily looked at, and then even fewer go to inquiry. So we think the inquiry rate is about 1.5%. So that sounds really low, and it sounds like, well, actually the risk of a claim going to inquiry must therefore be really low. But the feedback we've had from tax inspectors is that they tend to follow a pattern, so that the rate is low, but if they see a claim that they're not happy with from a particular provider, they're highly likely to look at more claims from that provider. So they'll go deep, if you like, once they start looking. So the headline risk sounds like it's low, but actually the potential impact on you as a firm, it could be high. The last thing you want is that all the claims you've put through suddenly get inquired into. So it's really important that you do what we said earlier on. You've got a robust process, making sure you've got the right evidence, and making sure that you're answering all of the questions that HMRC might want to ask. And Alan, I know you've got some specific experience in that area, so I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I will do. Yeah. Apologies, I might get the hankies out in a minute just to mop the tears. But prior to WhisperClaims, we had, as I say, we were dealing with another. I don't really want to use the specialist word, but maybe consultant might be a better word. And like what Mike said then, I think what's happened with them, and unfortunately then happened to us as a result, because we were using them. all of the claims they submitted got inquired into from the revenue. We've never had an inquiry from a WhisperClaims submission, so they'll sort of put that in there straight away. But every single one that this company did effectively on our behalf for our clients was inquired into. The support we've had from WhisperClaims to actually defend them has been fantastic, because the consultants effectively washed their hands of it and wasn't interested in supporting us or our clients with the claim or the inquiries. So the support we've had from Jen and Richard and the guys at WhisperClaims in handling those has been fantastic. And without that additional support that obviously is outside of the norm, if you like, from WhisperClaims, I'm not quite sure what we'd have done, how we'd have handled it, having to try and defend claims that weren't ours in the first place. But yeah, they were phenomenal with that. So yeah, really important to get the right people to do it. And I think what we found is that when actually now we're in full control of it, we're not then at risk of another third party, whoever that may well be, putting through a sort of a spurious claim or an overzealous claim, and us being left footing that responsibility, because technically we're still the accountant, we're still the agent, that's still our client. So for us, that's crucial that we protect that relationship.
I think that's a really well was why we was for the rogue claims that you potentially were getting asked to submit. And we got to a point with one client where we actually refused to submit an R&D claim because it was just a blatant lie. It was completely massively ineligible, and there was nothing of substance to back it up, but it was a significant number. And my biggest concern was if we're seen to be somebody who's prepared to turn a blind eye to those sorts of things in R&D, what else potentially would we be prepared to turn a blind eye to? That opens up the VAT, the PAYE, CIS, corporation tax. So we lost the client on the back of it, and I don't know the outcome of the claim, but I think just having that assurance that you're in control of what is being effectively submitted in your name, I think is pretty important.
Just to let you know that we're almost out of time. Alan and Phil, are you okay to stay on for another 5 minutes? We do have a couple questions we could answer, and if anyone needs to head off, that's absolutely fine. I will be sending this as a recording, so you can watch back if you do miss some of the questions. So there is a question here. Does anyone actually just submit with the CT600, or is there a better separate submission?
We attach the WhisperClaims report to our CT600 just to give it that sort of weight. But I know there's big firms nationally that just put the numbers on, the tax form and hope it stacks up. And I think you're not doing yourself any real favours there.
Yeah, we do the same. We attach the report just to the CT600, so we don't do any sort of separate submissions to that. It's just part of that process.
Michael, are there any questions in there that you'd like to jump on?
There's one from Gail. It's asking, when clients collaborate, they can estimate the costs associated with R&D using the sliders. Is an estimate considered robust enough? So for the people who are on the call who are not WhisperClaims users, that just explain what Gail's talking about there. There are several points in the system where we allow you to use a slider to estimate costs against the kind of headline costs in the business. So is that robust enough? Well, there's a few answers to that, Gail. The key thing to remember, of course, is anything that you're submitting to HMRC, you need to substantiate it. You need to make sure that you've got evidence for it. So what's an estimate? You need to kind of follow that guideline. It's no use doing something that's made up. There's got to be something to substantiate the number that you're putting in there. So hopefully that answers Gail's question.
And there's a question here from Nick. Do the panel feel that HMRC policy and guidance genuinely accords with the legislation?
Yeah, I think so. I think it seems to tick the boxes. It puts us the way that we need it to be. It allows us to make assumptions and to make the claims in the appropriate way. So yeah, I'd be pretty alarmed if it was massively different. There's obviously some grey areas that we tend to WhisperClaims to support for, but generally, yeah, I think it's all right.
And Another question here from Glenn. What would you say is the biggest misconception of R&D tax relief claims in general that perhaps causes confusion?
It's got to be the white coats. I don't have a lab. I don't produce. I don't make anything. I'm not eligible. And actually, you know, a lot of the stuff we found is in technology and things like that, and things. So there's masses of opportunities that people are going without. So again, ask the questions. You know, you understand the legislation, the guidelines. It's not the client's job to do that. It's ours. So ask the questions and delve in. And a worst case scenario, the client will thank you at the end of the session for taking the time to understand and invest in their business, really. So it's a win-win from that point of view.
Mike, any further questions that you think you can answer here?
There's just one from David. Is there a conflict of interest in performing the R&D tax credit claim by the client's company auditors? I'll just give a quick view on that. If you're an auditor, you're not allowed to charge fees on a contingent basis. So a lot of audit firms are charging for R&D on a fixed fee basis as a result of that. And I guess that's for precisely that reason, that there's perhaps a perception if they were charging on a contingent basis, then there would be a conflict of interest. So that they're kind of forced to try and avoid that situation. But I don't know if you two guys have got experience of situations where you've seen that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all.
And I think just the final question, this is for Alan. So regarding the jewelers, your initial client contact was this person a technical or commercial person, board level or manager level?
Yeah, so the initial contact we had was at the board level. So it was the actual business owners, but they were there's three of them. That's three directors. Two of them were goldsmiths. One of them was then involved in the kind of the more the process side of it, the sort of admin aspects of what the business did. So together, the three of them were able to really sort of outline the business really, and in detail explain some of the processes and some of the specific examples that they've actually worked on to give that real kind of understanding of what actually was involved.
Okay. So that's us at the end of the webinar. I think that was brilliant. Thanks so much, guys, for your contribution, for answering all those questions. I think there's some really good points made. As I said, this session has been recorded, so I will send this to everybody who registered for the event today, so you'll have a copy in your inbox today, if not tomorrow. I'll also send you over Phil and Alan's case study. So a couple of months ago, I did interview both of them. So there's a nice write-up of their story, the journey they've been on, and some of the points that they've made today. So I'll pop that into the email so you can have a little read through that. And I'll also list all the upcoming events. So if there's anything that you're interested in, you can get yourself booked onto those. So thanks everybody for joining us, and hope to see you soon.